So welcome to the first video in the Pro Tools Bootcamp video series. This is setting up your session and getting used to the Pro Tools environment. And this could be perhaps the most important video series, and that's why it comes first, is to understand Pro Tools and to work effectively in it. You need to understand what the heck this window you're looking at all day long does and how you can access the power within Pro Tools. So as we're going to set up to record a song, and that's what we're going to do through this entire video series, is do a song start to finish. I'm going to show you how I approach Pro Tools, the blank session, and how we get things ready to go. The first thing I want to do is talk about opening up a new session. If you start Pro Tools and you choose File, New Session, or Command or Control N, during the beginning of a Pro Tools session, you're going to get a dialog box similar to this, and it's going to give you a few options. It's going to ask you, do you want to create a session from a template, which we can look at later, but I want you to understand a blank session so you can create your own sessions. You can customize them the way you want, and so you will be able to know what the heck is going on when you fire up a session. Under that is some session parameters. You can see a few different areas. These are a lot simpler than you think they are. Audio file type is exactly what it sounds like. There are two types that Pro Tools will generally offer you, WAV files and AIFF. When in doubt, go with WAV. Many other DAWs use this format, and so your tracks can be easily interchangeable with them. If you happen to mix in a different session, in a different studio with a different DAW, or if you just want to export these out for any other editing program, .wav is your best bet. Bit depth is important in the sense that digital recording used to only be at 16-bit. There was a time before 24-bit was available because you're getting a lot more information recorded with 24-bit. These days, I have no reason that I can see to drop back down to 16-bit. 24-bit is becoming a very simple standard, and a lot of your plugins are going to work better and sound better, and your recordings will benefit from recording at a higher bit depth. So you don't have to understand much other than go with 24-bit in your sessions all the time. Now, sample rate is a little more debatable. And again, this is stuff that's really boring to most of us, but it's important in only a couple senses. One is you need to know what sample rate you're recording at and what's available to you, because there's certain settings that your song has to be when you bounce it down. And we'll look at that in a later video. Depending on your audio interface, you're going to have a few different options here. You may just have 44.1 and 48 available to you, or you may have 88.2 and 96, or maybe up to 192. These higher sample rates mean you can capture audio into a digital version of it at a more detailed rate, so to speak. Okay, so if you think of a movie has cameras that capture what's going on in real life, and it's just basically it's capturing a bunch of still images and playing them back to back really fast, kind of like an old school flip book, you know? And the higher the frame rate means the more pictures are taken per second to create a real fluid, lifelike motion picture. And the same thing is happening here with audio. The higher the sample rate, the more samples of audio or snapshots of audio are taken in a given second. Okay, so you would think the higher the sample rate that's afforded to you, the better. And you would be right in that it's capturing a more accurate recording. Here's two things. One, when you bounce a track down, we'll see that it has to end up at 44.1 anyways for it to be CD, or 48 if you're recording to DVD audio. But what I find is when you get up higher than 48, you're really going to take up a lot more space on your hard drive. These audio files will take up more space because they're recording more data. And I've done test after test and seen other professionals do test after test, and personally, I don't see any reason to go anything higher than 44.1. I record and mix at 24-bit 44.1 all day long, every day, with great results, and many other people do. So it's a personal decision, and you'll have to test it out, but I think you'll be fine with 44.1 24-bit. And then I/O settings, most of us, it's just going to be stereo mix, nothing fancy unless you're doing surround sound. Now, you don't have to always choose these every time you start a session. I just want you to understand part of the boot camp is getting the foundation, all right? You need to know this is what's going on in your session and what you're recording at, so that you can work well with other systems, so that you won't be recording something that is in 48 kilohertz per second. Instead, you've got a session at 44.1, and then the vocal sounds stretched and weird, and you need to know what's going on. But typically, if this is how you work in Pro Tools, this will stay the same every time you fire up a new session, and you won't have to change it. And you fire up OK, and that's going to create you a blank session just like this. And this is a beautiful thing because this is where we're going to be able to start our song, and you're going to be able to see how Pro Tools will help you create music. It's a little daunting at first, but the more you know about each section, the more you'll be able to work quicker, and the more you'll be able to get out of your Pro Tools session. So let's not waste any time. Let's take a look at the edit window. This is what we're looking at. There's two main windows in Pro Tools, the edit and the mix window. And this is where you're going to spend most of your time, to be honest with you. We're going to go into more details about all these tools up here, edit tools, edit modes. We'll hit this in the editing video. But what I want you to see is this main area. And we're going to create some tracks. We're going to get things set up to record. And you're going to see where a song begins. Okay? The first thing we need to do is create a track. And you do that simply from the track menu, new. Pretty simple. And the shortcut for this is Shift-Command-N on a Mac or Shift-Control-N on a PC. You're going to use that dialog box a lot, so you might as well learn the key command. That's going to bring up some simple options. How many tracks do you want to create? Do you want to create 1? Do you want to create 13? Do you want it to be a mono or a stereo track? You know, is it going to be a bass guitar or a vocal? It'll probably need mono. Is it going to be a piano or an overhead for drums? You probably want stereo. And then what type of track? You have 5 types in Pro Tools. Audio tracks, where you obviously record audio. Aux tracks or inputs, where you can put effects and you can route other tracks too. It can sort of be like a group fader. You can do a lot with auxiliary inputs. We'll look at those later. Your master fader, we'll look at that later. MIDI tracks, if you want to record MIDI, obviously. And instrument tracks, which are a form of a MIDI track, but you have virtual instruments that you can insert right on this track. So you choose the track type. Samples or ticks. Most of us are going to go with samples if it's audio. Ticks if you're going to do some sort of MIDI drum loop, as ticks will automatically shift and compress in time if you change the tempo. But that's all you'll see. And the only other thing over here is a plus. And this creates another row. So if you want to create mono audio tracks, but also stereo instrument tracks, you can create them all at once. It saves you time. But I'm going to save you a little bit of time. The shortcut here is once you've opened up the window, so Shift-Command-N, go ahead and Shift-Command-N again and again. And you're going to sort of get those little guys. All right, makes sense? I'm going to start with just a mono audio track and click Create. And that goes ahead and makes your beautiful track. You've got a few things over here that we're going to look at, and then obviously a blank track going over in time. This is the track name. This is really important. It's really basic, but this is the first thing you want to change. Because Pro Tools by default, the moment you record something, is going to label and name that audio file or that region based off of what the track name is. So if you don't change this name and you start recording all these great vocals and all these great bass lines and guitar parts and key parts, and then later you're trying to go find that one take and they're all labeled audio 1, audio 2, audio 3, audio 07, audio 36, that's going to mean nothing to you. So go ahead and double click and call it something more memorable like guitar. Okay? Below that, you've got a record enable button, and we're going to look at this in the next video. This is what you need to arm your track so Pro Tools knows what tracks you want to record to. You have a solo and mute. These are your views. We'll look at these in more detail later, but you'll get a heads up of if you want to look at the waveform, or do you want to see the volume or the mute or the pan, or do you want to look at different playlists. This will change what the track shows you, and this is very, very powerful. Below here we have some automation options, which we'll look at in the mixing video, and this will be very cool. Here we have the Elastic Audio plugin, which we'll look at in the editing video as well. But this is very important, the I/O section. This is where you're going to be able to select which input on your interface you're recording from. Okay, we'll look at that in the recording video. And then the output, where you're going to hear this. Okay, volume, you can click up and down, a little fader appears. And pan, you can pan left and right, all from the edit window, okay? and Option click will take you back to 0. Very helpful. Or Alt click on the PC. This is your foundation of a track. Now, you can see different things on a track with this little menu here, and this is very, very important. This is your edit window view selector. So you can see I have I/O checked and track color checked because the I/O is visible, and right here the track color is visible. That is it. Now, this is always going to be visible. But what if you want to see comments? And this is very helpful if you say, I recorded with an SM57 microphone, let's say, on my cabinet. You can type in whatever you want, and it's still a little note to yourself. Or I use this preamp, or we had the drums mic'd in this way. You can write yourself a note. Instruments, this is going to be more for routing your MIDI tracks. Inserts, this is where you can put plugins. Sends, this is where you can send to different plugins or different tracks. Real-time properties, this is where you can adjust some really cool things when you're doing MIDI, and we'll look at that in a later video. But I want you to be aware of all these things being available to you to check or uncheck. You can uncheck them and they disappear, or you can just hold Option or Alt and click, and they will all disappear one by one, whatever you want to see. Okay? The other thing you want to know about is track height. This ruler to the right, you can click and it'll bring up a menu. You can have micro, this is the smallest one available to you, or fit to window, which is really cool, or back to medium. You can do the same thing from this drop down here, or you can just move your mouse to the bottom of the track and you can click and drag. Pretty cool. So just so you know how to control the track, that's really, really important. And this is going to apply to any kind of track you have. Okay, I'm just showing you on an audio track, but this will apply to any kind of track. So what I want to show you now is setting up a click track, getting your tempo ready, because what I like to do is get my tempo and my markers and everything set up before I record a note, okay? So let's take a look at getting a click track into this session. The easiest way to do that in Pro Tools 8 is go to Track, Create Click Track. They've made it easy for you. And what it's done is created an aux input with the click plugin already set up on it. That's all it does. You used to have to do that manually before Pro Tools 8, but now it's automatic. If you press play, there it is. That's your click track. Real simple. So I'm going to keep this sort of, small. I don't really need to see much of it, but it's there. And now we can hear what the tempo is doing, okay? So let's look at setting a manual tempo. And you can do that from the transport, which is a window. It's a small window, so window transport. But again, if you're going to be a power user, you need to know the keyboard shortcut, because this will save you a lot of time, and it's simply Command or Control 1. All right, Command or Control 1 makes it appear or disappear. And depending on what settings you have, you may see some different elements in your transport. You want to make sure that under View, Transport, you've got at least counters, MIDI controls, and expanded checked. Otherwise, it's going to get a little smaller. And you can set this up the way you want, but what we need to see is the counters, MIDI controls, and expanded, is where we're going to have a lot of options to us with tempo and count off and that kind of stuff. So over here, if this conductor track, this is what it's called, is checked, this is set to follow a sort of defined tempo grid, and I'll show you that in a minute, but let's start with it off so that this is now not ghosted. And this is the tempo of the song. So you could choose 80 and listen to your tempo. A little slower. You could click and drag up to 99, let's say. All right, you can sort of see how that's changing. Obviously, you need to know the tempo of your song before you record it. But if you don't know the tempo, you can use a really helpful tip, and it's called tap for tempo. What I do is I simply click here so it's selected, and I just sort of tap the T key on my keyboard, okay? So if your tempo is a little slower, tap the letter T, boom, tap, boom, boom, tap, boom, tap, boom, boom, tap. You see it's around 94 BPM. Click enter, and it locks it in. You can see it change up here, 94, boom, t, boom, boom, t. Boom. And your click track's going to follow exactly what you had in your head. This is so helpful. So I happen to know my song is going to be at 120, a little faster, so you can type it in and click enter. But use tap for tempo with the letter T key on your keyboard to start all the time. It'll at least get you close, and then if you feel that you want it to be a little faster, a little slower, you can obviously go up, down, a few clicks, whatever you need, but that's going to obviously get you in the ballpark. Here's also where you can change your meter. So you can double click and say, well, really my song is 3/4 instead of 4/4. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. So it's going to tell Pro Tools what is the nature of your song. And this is important to just go ahead and tell Pro Tools now so that it will always follow what you're going to do in your song. In my case, I know I'm going to be 4/4, 120, really simple. Okay? But what I want to show you is what if your song doesn't stay at 120? Let's say you slow down in another part of the song. Plenty of music speeds up or slows down or has different feels for different parts of the song. This is really important. What you would want to do is engage the conductor track. It's going to ghost this out because now you're not going to have one static tempo, okay? And what we're going to do is come up here to these different rulers, and you see this one's called tempo. If you don't see tempo, there's a menu up here, and this is your ruler menu. And again, you can see markers and tempo and bars and beats are selected, and that's why I see markers, tempo, bars, and beats. You could also see minutes and seconds for time. You could also see your meter of the song. You see what I'm saying? So you can see what you want to see or don't see. And again, option, click, makes it disappear. But right now, I want to see that it's 120 to start out with. But what if you know that about bar 17, you want to slow down? Well, you're at 120. What you do is simply select with the selector tool, this middle one here, select right here in the middle on the ruler and click this plus sign. And it's going to open up a tempo change box, and you want to snap it to bar 17, 1, and I want my tempo to slow down to 100 right there, and click enter. And you can see this little triangle show up and it says 100, and you can even see now the bars, they condense because it's gotten slower. You can sort of see that now, instead of being 4 bars, every single one, you can see just 2 bars there, another 2 bars. So let's take a listen. You hear that tempo change? Real simple. So you can just add these tempo changes wherever you want. Now you may say, well, what if I want a gradual tempo change? What if I don't have this static slowdown right at a bar beat? And that's a great point because a lot of music is going to do that. And you have a couple ways to do that. You're going to come over here to the tempo ruler, and there's a sort of a triangle that you can spin down, and this gives you some options. You can see visually north to south, up and down, that I had 120 here and then it drops to 110. What's really cool is that Pro Tools lets you have complete control over the tempo. Let's say instead of it dropping right at 17, I know the last couple of bars, so let me zoom in here. Last couple of bars, I want it to slow down from 120 to 100 gradually. Well, this is where you'd use the pencil tool. And if you click and hold the pencil tool, you have a few options. I've still got the mouse clicked. I'm going to let go on line. And that means when I draw with this pencil tool, it's going to draw a straight line. So I'm going to click here and just draw down to about 100. And you can see what it did, putting teeny little tempo changes ever so often, and it's evenly spaced out so that it will end up at 100. Now, I didn't quite perfectly drag it. What you can do is click and drag exactly where you want it to end up. You can sort of see the blue diamonds on either side. If I want it to start a little earlier, I just click and drag that back, up or down. This is giving me complete control. And if I zoom out here, I can take a listen to what the click's going to do. Nice and smooth retard. It just slows down perfectly and ends up where I want it. And again, you can adjust that. Now you can use the pencil tool. You can be a curve if you'd rather, and you can sort of drag it down. It can be freehand where you could just drag whatever tempo change you want, and Pro Tools will basically follow that. You tell Pro Tools what to do in the tempo ruler, and the click will follow that. And not only the click, but you can see the bars and beats, the whole grid will follow it. And this is important to spend a little bit of time setting this up before you record anything, so that you have this uniform guide track, this uniform map. And when we move forward with our song in this boot camp, you're going to see how having the tempo decided is really, really helpful, even on a simple song as is the one I'm going to do. And this is where you can control it, and when you don't want to see that anymore, just spin it back up, and Pro Tools will know to do that every single time. And one other thing, you can always click and drag and click delete, and those little tempo changes are gone, and you're back to 120 for the whole song. Okay? So in the next video, guys, we're going to set up and record our first bit of audio, and I'm going to show you how to really get your guide track ready so the rest of the instruments will be easy to record and you can fill out the song really fast. Thanks again for watching.